Let's queer up students and youth culture. Is Florida Don't Say Gay over? Well, here is what really happened. Yesterday, everything changed for Florida schools, and LGBTQ plus Florida classrooms will now permit discussions on sexual orientation and gender identity after constraints put by the state's controversial Don't Say Gay law. According to the Associated Press, the agreement establishes clear parameters for discussing LGBTQ plus topics in educational setup. The settlement outlines permissible conversations concerning sexual orientation and gender identity within Florida's classrooms. This comes in response to a law enacted 2 years ago that restricted instruction on these subjects. Critics of the law contended that it left educators uncertain about whether openly identifying as LGBTQ plus or displaying related symbols like rainbow stickers in educational settings violated the legislation. As per the settlement, the Florida Board of Education will issue instructions to all school districts clarifying that the law does not prohibit discussions about LGBTQ plus individuals, nor does it hinder the adoption of anti-bullying measures based on sexual orientation and gender identity. We're getting strides here. Moreover, it allows the formation of gay-straight alliance groups. The agreement specifies that the law applies equality to both LGBTQ plus heterosexual individuals and does not cover library materials not directly used in classroom teaching. We really need to listen to what that's saying. The settlement says that conversations on sexual orientation and gender identity are allowed as long as they are not part of formal instruction. Here's where I'm getting a little concerned. Nadine Smith, Executive Director of Equality Florida, praised the legal victory and hailed the strength of collective action. Scott Galvin, the Executive Director of Safe Schools, said the significance for LGBTQ plus youth can hardly be understood in its value. Queer News Tonight anchor and Out South Florida senior reporter John Hayden, who's really always on top of these things, spoke to Galvin moments after the settlement.
Power of the Don't Say Gay law 2 years ago when it was enacted was in its vagueness. You weren't quite sure as a teacher what you were or were not allowed to do. What today's ruling does is clarifies. It states a lot of the things that can be done. From our standpoint, having the gay-straight alliances be allowed to meet again is super huge. Teachers now know they can put, pride flags in their classroom. They can put pictures of a spouse on a desk. It wipes away the real power of the law. And while I would have rather seen the entire law just be thrown out, at least this is a major step at clarifying a lot of the things that were left to the imagination. And that fear of the unknown is what made teachers and schools so very afraid. But there will always be bigots who try to block things like gay-straight alliances from happening or pride clubs or anything like that inside of a school. It's never going to be, it never was an easy blank slate. But this goes a long way towards clarifying. And school districts can be big. You take Dade, you take Broward or Tallahassee. Even in schools where administrators previously were sort of friendly, even they were sort of cowed into not knowing what they can do. Even if this only opens up half of the schools in some of those more conservative districts to being willing to do GSA and LGBT stuff, that's a huge step forward. I didn't think we were going to be back here at this moment now for another 10 years. Safe Schools is going to throw a party. I mean, legitimately, we're going to dust off the big old Empowerment Day events that we used to do. We pay for it all. We invite the schools. We pay for their buses and their pizza, and the panelists come in and talk. We're going to immediately do that again. April was our traditional month. Well, it looks like we're right on time to be able to do it again this April. So we're gonna celebrate this major advancement, it's a big moment, John. I really didn't think we'd get anywhere near this for several years. And again, I wish that the entire law was just thrown out. But For those who want to support the LGBT and queer youth in their schools, we're going to be here to help them do that at the best levels we possibly can.
I mean, listen, he mentioned a bunch of great points there, right? So we all wish that the law was just thrown away, but we have to celebrate small wins, and we have to appreciate the fact that groups like the Gay Straight Alliance are extremely important in middle school, high school, whatever it is. We just need more change. So in my mind, I want to believe that we're only going to go up from here. But of course, there's that voice in the back of my head that is kind of saying, is this a distraction to something else? Are we going to take a step forward and then take 3 steps back? I'm interested to hear what you all have to say and think about it.
Well, I think, having spent the last 5 years working with Barney Frank, who's been prolific for our community and, helping us establish the ETF and index on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, it was about what he always said in our board meetings. We have to take the tiny, tiny steps. If he learned anything in his 40 years, making change on Congress and leading Dodd-Frank and leading the banking financial system, his goal was to make the tiny, tiny necessary baby steps every day, every week, every month, every year. And I think as long as our momentum is going in towards our benefit, and this is a little more than a baby step, but I think it's in the right direction. And I think it's now time to put the gas on the pedal, because at the end of the day, or the pedal on the gas, because we need to build this momentum and keep pushing for even more change. I didn't really like the concept of not able to do instruction, because what are teachers there to do but instruct and teach? So I still feel like teachers may be on eggshells.
There's a little bit of a gray area now, but at least we're moving forward in the right direction. It went from black and white to the gray in the middle, but moving it forward to us. And like you said, little tiny steps lead to big steps, lead to leaps. So, I think it's a good move for us and a safe move, especially for these kids.
I totally agree.
And I think that I hope eventually we'll stop being on the defensive all the time. And I hope that we'll take this win, and I hope that we'll keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing further and seeing what will happen, because it's great that, there's so many parents that are gay or that are trans, that are affected by this, that they wouldn't be able to, their children wouldn't be able to talk about their parents, and so many other things that this affects. And I'm glad to see that this is happening. But I just hope that we continue to push and be like, okay, not that, we won, and let it go and move on to something else.
Work's not done.
Right, because sometimes in this community, we'll go from one thing and we'll talk about it for a while and we'll advocate for it for a while, and then we'll move on to the next thing. I hope that we'll stay on this and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and on that, I like what you said about we need to get off of the defensive, and I do think it's time we shift gears to the offensive.
Yes.
And I actually have a copy of the settlement agreement. My partner is a teacher, and they sent this out to the teachers today. And so one of the things I find particularly fascinating, and I'll just read from this, is it says, the statute applies equally regardless of viewpoint. Put differently, the statute restricts classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity, not homosexuality and transgender identity. For example, it would violate the statute to instruct students that heterosexuality is superior or that gender identity is immutable based on biological traits. And so in that regard, to simplify this, it's basically saying it's illegal to say that being trans is wrong. It is against their policy to say being straight is better than being gay. And so I think that actually gives us now opportunity to go on the offense and say, are there schools that are violating this non-discrimination part of this settlement? And how can we, again, as far as I can tell, I don't think any of us here are teachers, and we have to go back to that as well, right? What is this doing for the teachers in the classroom, right? That is a sigh of relief for them. Whew, I can exist in my place of employment, right? And for the children, it also is saying you have a right to exist and your elders have a right to exist in this space. And so I think, we have to take the win. And I think it is bigger than we are necessarily making it out to be, because a lot of folks aren't going to read the nitty-gritty details of the legislation and say, how can we take this from defense to let's flip this around and say, no, this is the agreement you guys made, and you're not holding up to your part of the bargain in terms of non-discrimination.
And I think your statement is a celebration of equality, because they've just said now, straight kids, gay kids, trans, we're all equal. It's equal. They're all the same. Nobody's better, less, worse. Or it's a celebration of equality.
Yes.
And that's why like shows like this, like you're just talking about what you just read, you know, we have to get out the word out to everybody.
Absolutely.
And shows like this allows us to broadcast it to the whole world.
Absolutely.
So we're very lucky to have a show like this.
It's a very important platform for these issues specifically, and beautifully said, by the way.
Thank
I
you.
love listening to you. I really do.
Thank you.